Okay, and hello and welcome. My name is Martin, and today what we're going to do is we're going to create our first enemy character. This is going to be an actor that we are going to generate, which is going to be labeled as a pawn. And from there, basically, we're going to be using what we just learned with like the mobility, the physics, and the collision settings to create the conditions that we're looking for to have a mesh turn into another actor, which will look like an explosion that also has a sound. It basically has like a fireball, a little bit of smoke, and then what sounds like an explosion sound, and then that's going to generate, and it's going to take the place of the mesh that we just saw, right? So the whatever whatever mesh we choose to make the explosion, the bomb with, the stationary mine with, it will go away, and what we'll see in its place is this thing that looks like a little puff of smoke and a little pop of fire with that sound in it. And then from there, what we need to do is make sure that all the elements of that go away. So then that way the floor is cleared and you don't have to worry about any remnants of that being left on the floor. So let's go ahead and start this. So the first thing that I want you to do is create a new folder and call it A_enemies. I've already got one because this will be, we did some during class. So I'm going to create another one. I'm going to say A_enemy2. So then that way I have a second version and I'll be able to show you here. Okay, so now we're in content A_enemy, and I'm going to right click in this space, and when I do, just like we got up there to create a new folder, down here we have blueprint class. So if we select that, we actually get another dialog box which gives us a whole bunch of different types of classes that we can select, different ways of different things basically. The three that we need to focus on right now, or the two really that we're going to focus on, is pawn and character. So the real difference is that the pawn is possessed. It can receive information from a controller. So it's an actor that's put out on the floor. And what makes it its own class is that it has the ability to be able to be quote unquote possessed and receive input from other controllers. A character is basically the same thing, but it will have some of its own internal AI and also the ability to be able to create a blueprint directly onto it. So with it's a little bit different. These are more like human shapes, things that would have walking, running, jumping. If you needed those sorts of things, then you would need to build it into a character class as opposed to a pawn class, because you could put it in a pawn class because you'd have to build a lot of extra stuff. If your character already comes in with animations and a skeleton and things like that, it just makes more sense to put it into a character, so then that way you can control those aspects a little bit better because they would already be by default there on the character. So for us, like I said, we're going to be doing a pawn. So let's go ahead and select pawn, and we'll get this little icon that looks like a little book, a grid. It's meant to be like a blank blueprint. And in the name, we're going to go ahead and call this S mine. Now I already have one called S mine, so I can't have two. So I'm going to call this one number 2 for me. Right, so then that way I know the difference. Now once we've done that, we get the icon that looks like a pawn, and so what we need to do basically now is double click on the pawn, so then that way we can get into its blueprint. So let's go ahead and do that. So once inside the pawn, what we'll notice is we have again three tabs going across the top, very similar to other things that we've seen. And in the event graph, we will have, this is where we'll be writing the blueprints, the actual code. Conscription scripts, we'll talk about that later. That's not important for right now. This we will need to do something in, and the viewport we will also be using. The little ball that we see there in the middle is actually the center. That's the center of the X, Y, and Z axis. So when you place your object, if you want this to show up in the middle of your object, when it's placed on the floor, then you would leave that there. Otherwise, you would place the object higher, so then that way this is the bottom or the center of the object. So when it gets placed in, that's how it would be placed in. Okay, so from there, what we need to do is we need to add something to be seen, because this little dot will not be seen by the player. So we're going to come up here to Components panel, and we're going to add a component. And what we're looking for, you could put a static mesh, but we're going to just drop a cube. Now, the reason why I do this is because we can actually come over here to the static mesh and select something else. So if we click on cube, I'm going to look and see if I can't find anything. You know what? I'm just going to type in bomb and see if I get something. I have a bomb crater. I have a fire bomb panel. I don't know. What's this thing? Nice. It's a bit big. It's a bit big. Let's bring this down to 0.5. And this is and all this is just a static mesh that I'm finding somewhere in one of my kits, in something that I've downloaded. So now that I have that, what I could do is I could look for the same material. So let's click in here and see if we can't find. See what they're calling this thing. SM firebomb. So let's see if we can't find. Okay, the last one I found by actually typing this in. So there's a material that's got it. Okay, cool. We found the material. Hooray. All right, so now we've got the material. Okay, since we've made changes to this, you'll notice that our check mark up here is now gone, and we get a little question mark with some gears. So what we need to do now to make these changes take place is to hit compile. If you don't hit compile, this will not change. So if I go look now, let's go, wow, in the wrong place here. Let's go back to content, a under score. There we go. So you'll see now that that now indeed looks like that. And if I want, I can go ahead and grab one of these and put it on the floor. Okay. So now if we look at it, if we were just to push play right now and see what was to happen, it should be a static mesh. And by default, it should be blocking anything labeled pawn. And that's about all it's doing right now, right? Okay. Still a bit big, so I'm actually going to make it a bit smaller. Let's make this 0.25. Compile, save, close, play. I like that size better. Okay. It'll look better with the explosion that we put on it. All right, so now that we have that, we need to start actually writing the code part to this. So what we'll need to do is double click on the icon or on the pawn to open up the blueprint editor again. And with blueprint, I think we're done at this point. We can come over here to the cube. And I guess the one thing we do need to go ahead and do is physics. We're not going to turn on because it's just stationary. It's not actually moving, and we don't want it to move. What we do want to make sure is that generates overlap event, right? So if this thing overlaps with one of the other character types, then at that point we would get the ability for an execution of what would follow after that condition is met, right? So in order to make sure that we can interact with this, we will have to switch this from all block, because right now it's blocking everything, and that would only generate a hit, not an overlap. So we do need to go ahead and switch this over to custom, and in custom we want to have pawn overlap. So when this thing overlaps with anything labeled as a pawn, we will then get the execution of that condition, right? Whatever would be next after that. So we did make some changes here. So what we want to do now is hit compile and save. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to go into the event graph. And inside the event graph, there are 3 bubbles. We're going to highlight all 3 of those bubbles and just select them and hit delete. We don't need those right now. So what you're looking at here, you can see it named down there, blueprint. And what the blueprint is an area for you to place pieces of code, or for us, bubbles, right? We're just going to call them bubbles. And we're going to connect these pieces of information or these bubbles together with string, and then that's going to create situations for us inside the game, right? So there's really no way to easily explain this other than just to show you what's happening. So the thing that we have right now is the cube. If we select the cube and we right click in the blueprint, we're going to get an options box. This options box is going to give us all sorts of different little boxes that we can pull up. Each one of those boxes, like I said, is a small piece of code that can be used and connected in different ways to create different situations. So what we are looking for is for this to be selected, so then that way we get these 2 option boxes, because without that selected you do not get the box. So cube needs to be selected. And we're going to go to add event for cube. Here what we're going to do is we're going to select collision, and you'll notice that we get a couple of things. So we get add on component begin overlap, add on component end overlap, and add on component hit. So remember those options that we had over here, generates hit event or generates overlap event. There you go. So there is the equivalent. When you say yes to this and we add, let's say, something like on component begin overlap, the second we overlap with that object, we're going to get the piece of code that will come after this bubble. If we do a component end overlap, the moment we stop overlapping with the object, then we would get the condition, right? So in that case, maybe you step on the mine, but it doesn't go off until you take your foot off of it, right? So at that point, it would be at the end of you guys overlapping, as opposed to at the beginning where you would be, as soon as you touch it, it would explode, right? Or cause the conditions afterwards to happen. Now on the hit, there is no beginning or end. It's a single instance. You hit it, it's instantaneous, and then it's over. So in that case, there is no beginning or end of the overlap with hit. It's just one thing. Whereas the overlap, because it can start at a moment in time, stay there for a while, and then there's the ending of it. Because of that time, we do get a beginning and an end for that. So what we're looking for is begin overlap. So we're going to select that one. And we look at the cube that is created, or the piece of code that is created, the bubble, and we see that we have quite a few options. Some of them have different colorizations, which we'll talk about later, like integers. When we talk about number, those are green. When we talk about booleans, which are yes or no statements, those are going to be red. Blues, I think, are functions. There's like a deeper blue that was down here that's something else. There's this red thing. But the big one that we're looking for is this white square. This white square, when we hover over it, says execute. And when we have an execute, this basically is when, what we're saying is when this cube and something else overlap, then we want this condition to happen, right? So what we're looking to do here is we actually need 2 things to happen. And I'll explain quickly, so then that way you understand why we're going to use this next bubble. So when we spawn, when we convert our, in this case, our, what looks like our little firebomb, our little torpedo thing, right, into an explosion, the mesh that was the torpedo tube is gone. We can no longer affect that anymore. When the explosion happens, sometimes what will end up happening is you will get what feels like an invisible wall. And what that invisible wall is that sprite that we just called in, that explosion, but a piece of it maybe didn't go away, right? And when that happens, you still have an element, you have some part of the component of the of that bomb or of that explosion there, and because of that, you can't walk through it. So it's a bug. So, and it's not necessarily a bug, it's just the fact that we can't select it and then tell it to go away. So there's going to be a little thing that we're going to have to do by creating a variable and then destroying the variable. But anyways, so there's two things that we need to get rid of and make sure are completely gone. The first thing, which is the firebomb, the mesh that we see before we collide with it, before it explodes, and then the cloud, smoke, fire sound that is generated afterwards, right? Once the collision has taken place. So two things we need to get rid of. We need a way to be able to split and create a first do this, then do this. And that's done through creating a sequence. So we're going to pull this out and we're going to type in sequence. And when we do, underneath flow control, this is the one that we're looking for. If you like, you can star it. That way, next time you pull up, it'll come up at the top of the list, or it'll be it'll show up more often. You don't have to if you don't want to, if you can remember it. I think it just puts it in your favorites. And then from there, we're gonna select sequence. So once we've got sequence, we can see a first do this, then do this. Remember, this is a computer, so 0 is actually the first number, not 1. If we need to add more things, like let's say we needed more steps that this was going to take place, we would add some by adding the pin. And if we don't need them, we can just right click on them and say remove the execution pin, remove the execution pin. In our case, like I said, we only need 2. So once we've got this, the next thing that we need to do is we need to create that explosion sprite, right? So to do this, we're going to click and drag off of the 0, and we're going to type in spawn actor. And the one that we are looking for is this one right here called spawn actor from class. And what that's going to do is going to give us again a function box. I can tell because it's blue. And that it's got a little thing there that's letting me know that's a game component. So it feels like something clicking, or it's like an action effect kind of deal. Anyways, and once that's there, this right here underneath class, right? So remember that the pawn that we're in is a class. So we're calling in another class, another classification of something, and we're going to click on that, and we're going to scroll down until we see blueprint explosion, or blueprint effect explosion. We're going to click on that, and this is now how this is going to then call this up. Now the problem is that this actor doesn't know where to be created, right? So it doesn't know how where in the environment it should be created. So we need to tell it. We'll see that we have a spawn transform, and we see transform. We're like, why does that say transform? But if we click on this and we come over here, the location, rotation, and scale is underneath what tab? Transform, right? So when we look at spawn transform, spawn means create, to spawn, and transform is literally the location that you want me to create. That's what it's saying. So from here, we're going to click and drag out, and we're going to type in get world transform. And when we do that, what it's going to do is it's going to look at different things that are attached in the object that we have, or maybe something down here, and it's going to look at that, and it's going to say, hey, these are the different things that I could probably get information from. And one of them is the cube. We'll see that the cube is right here, which is remember that was the original static box that we placed in the viewport before we changed it. We also get the default scene root, which is this thing right here. Explosion audio, which is a component that we can't see right now, but it's part of the sprite that we just created, and the P explosion, which is also part of the sprite that we just created, but we don't see any information for it at the moment. So we do want the cube, right? Now, all that did is tell this spawn, the actor, the explosion, where we are, right? So it's basically saying get the location, rotation, and scale of the cube, right, which is us, right? Remember that the cube is now this thing, and it's going to spawn, it's going to create the explosion sprite there. Now, just with what we have now, we actually will see something because we have told it to turn into something, and we've told it where to turn into something. So at this point, with what I've got, I'm actually going to go ahead and compile and save. And we're going to put one of these out on the floor, which I've already done, and we are going to play and see what happens. Okay, so we see that what's happening is that we are indeed getting an explosion, but it's happening every time we hit this thing, right? So that doesn't look realistic. This thing is not exploding, you know, it's not going away. And the other thing is that, you know, once this thing is exploded, we don't expect it to explode again. So we need to tell the sprite to also go away, right? The spawned actor. So let's hit escape. We're going to double click on this to go back. And so in order to get rid of this, the problem is that we don't have anything that we can select. There is no this anywhere else other than right here that we can click on and then tell it to go away. And of the buttons that we have here, none of those say destroy the actor. So in order to do that, we need to first turn this into a variable, and then we can destroy the variable because it will be attached to the actor. So here on the back, at the back part of the spawn actor, we have return value, and we're going to click and drag out. And what we're looking for is the second option down, which is called promote to variable. And when we do that, we have now created a variable. We can see that the name of the variable is new variable 0. There it is right here underneath a tab called variables, which we'll become very familiar with later. And now we can come over here into the details panel, and there's certain things that we can change about this. So let's go ahead and click on this, and we're going to say that this is going to be the S-mine, so the stationary mine underscore explosion. And I'm going to call this explosion 1. Okay, so now we have S-mine explosion 1. Now, the fact that we've converted this into a variable, there are events that we can now tie into this variable. And if you remember, an event is when something in the game gets registered, when some condition gets met. So in this case, the condition that's getting this whole thing started was the overlapping of the cube with something else. Over here, we now have the mine, the explosion variable that was created by this mesh, by this actor. And when we click on it, we now have down here at the bottom an option that says, as an event, right? It's saying it's an event, on destroy. So if we select the plus, we are adding it to the blueprint. And you can see that when it comes in, it says on destroyed S-mine explosion 1. So it's got the variable there. It's already part of the event. So what I want to do now is, at this point, we've called up the event, right? So when this thing is destroyed, we want to make sure that all the elements are gone. So what we'll do now is click and drag out. And what we want to say is destroy actor. And there's a lot of destroys, and we'll see some other ones later, but we won't. What we want to do is destroy actor. There it is right there underneath utilities. And you do want to make sure that the execute is connected plus the target, and that the execute is connected plus the target. Otherwise, this combination right here won't work. So what will happen now is that we should be able to shoot at it. It'll explode once, and then I guess it'll keep exploding because the original mesh is going to keep getting overlapped. So even though we're getting rid of this, there's going to be another one that's going to be generated, right? If we shoot it again. So if I hit compile and save, and I go play, there should be no change in this. Okay, and the reason, again, like I said, there's no change in this is because we keep making more of this one. The cube itself never went away, right? So that's what we need to do next. We need to make the cube go away, so then that way it'll look like the explosion took place, and all we have left, all we would have this, it would go away, and then we would have nothing left. There would be nothing to re-trigger the overlap. So to do this, we're going to click off of the then one, and this time we're going to type in destroy component. Okay, and sometimes if you don't see what you're looking for, you see up here where this little bar is, this little option. If you click there, what that's doing is it's trying to give you stuff that's, or maybe I just misspelled it. Let's just see if I can right click and type in destroy. Okay, so there's destroy actor, and we are looking for destroy component. So C. Okay, so there it is right there. So notice now that we're getting underneath components a destroy components cube, which is what this guy is, right? Because that's what the name is. And so that's what we're going to want. So we're going to right click again, and I'm going to recall that. So I'm going to type in destroy, and we say the component and the cube. Now, the way I did this, I didn't pull and drag out. I actually just sort of went and found it, and now I'm going to connect it. And part of that was because while I was dragging it out, it wasn't giving me as one of the options, but I can indeed connect that. So now what we have is we say when this object is going to be, when it gets overlapped, generate an overlap query, have that do two things. The first thing is to generate an explosion effect. That explosion effect will then become a variable, and that variable will be destroyed from the game after it is generated. And it will do that wherever the cube is, wherever it's been placed. From there, the next thing it's going to do is it's going to destroy the component, which is the cube. And that will make sure that nothing is left of this object. Now, the other thing I might do is I can also grab the default scene root and attach that to the target as well. And that's just another layer of just double checking and making sure that both of those objects are going to be destroyed. Okay, so at this point, that should now work. Let me just pull this over a little bit so y'all can see the whole code together. All right, so let's hit compile and save, and let's see if this does now indeed explode and not. Okay. We see that the object is gone. We can see that there's nothing left of the object because we were able to walk into the space and there was nothing left. So the only other check that we want to do now is, let me put another one of these out on the floor. So we'll just grab another one, and we'll grab a few. Okay, so now that we have a few of those, what we'll do is we'll push play, and for one of them we'll walk into them to see if we can get it to explode. And let's look down to see if it generates the explosion. It did. That explosion is tiny because we changed the size or the scale down to a quarter of the size, but it is there. We can indeed hear it. I can shoot it and sometimes see it. I guess if we make these things back to their original size, then maybe the explosion would be coming at a bigger size. But anyways, it is what it is. I wanted to use this mesh, and that's the effect that I got. So we'll just live with it. All right, so that is how to make a mine, how to make it explode, how to use the collision settings to ensure that they are both set to the same thing. Remember that our projectile and our cells were set to pawn, and these things were set to world static, and we told these objects to generate an overlap query or data point, a hit, not a hit because I don't want to use the word hit, but an overlap, and that then triggered the overlap components, what came after that event in the red, right? So what we wrote down in the event graph for that object, right? The this information right here. So we saw the flow of it. It gets hit, two things happen. First this, then this, right? And it gets generated, then it gets destroyed, and then so really there's like three things. This thing just has to split between two because this is a following of that. So generate the explosion, make the explosion go away, and then make sure that this guy, the cube itself, is gone. All right, so very cool. So in the next tutorial, what we'll do is we'll create a homing missile, which will be taking the same information that we did here, changing it a little bit, and making it chase our first-person character. So I hope you enjoyed the video and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.